whether it's from habitat loss or overeager hunters. Sometimes a species disappears from its homeland.
We actually wiped out the elk in Ontario.
They were apparently quite common. We have a lot of historical accounts, but they were extirpated.
Now the fight is on to bring these animals back into the ecosystem. But can they survive where they couldn't before? It's just after sunrise in Burwash, Ontario. Even in the early hours of the morning, this elk is ready to fight.
This is when the males get very aggressive towards other males and anything else that comes close to them, except for the elk cows, which obviously they want to breed with. So they very actively mark their rutting territory. The males are very aggressive and they take it out on the nearest object to them. So they like small trees like this, shrubs and so on. And they'll basically thrash them. Sometimes there's nothing left.
It's rutting season, time to mate. In species like elk, it's triggered by the days getting shorter as summer turns into fall. This way, any young conceived will be born in the spring.
They bugle, so they give off this very high-pitched sound. They grunt, they bark, so they are extremely vocal during this time of the year.
Being vocal helps them defend their harem. Most male elk will have 6 to 10 females with them. The big aggressive bulls can have up to 16. For Joseph Hammer, it's a perfect time to check up on the elk in the area.
Elk are a member of the deer family. Deer family are all of the animals that wear antlers on their head, at least the males do. The other name for elk is wapiti, and wapiti supposedly means white rump in one of the native languages. We do feel a bit possessive about the elk here, yeah. I feel in a way that these are our animals.
He has every reason to be fond of the elk in Burwash. He's the reason they're here in the first place.
So originally, there were elk in Ontario. They got wiped out in the 1800s, so late 1800s. I think the last sighting, if I remember correctly, was 1893.
In the 1930s, researchers tried to bring 150 elk back to the province, but soon they were linked to a deadly parasite called giant liver fluke, and the decision was made to kill them off. That was it until the 1990s, when Joe and his fellow researchers decided to give it another try.
Between 1998 and 2001, we brought into this area about 170 elk.
This area, called Burwash, was the perfect place for a new population of elk. Burwash used to be a thriving community of 1,000 people, home to a prison and the people who worked there. But all that changed in 1975, when the prison was closed and Burwash was wiped off the map.
When I first came here in 1987, there were still buildings here. And it was a true ghost town. There was just animals, and the animals were freely going in and out of the buildings, groundhogs and raccoons and so on. Now Burwash is just basically wilderness. You still have the roads here that used to serve the prison, but there are no more buildings, and basically it's the elk that roam around here, and bears, and the occasional moose that comes through, and it's a wild area.
When the elk arrived here from Alberta, they didn't exactly thrive.
Not all of them survived. A lot of them were stressed during the transport, and they were quite naive to the local conditions, so the wolves had an easy time getting them and so on.
After more than a decade, the elk population is starting to learn how to deal with the local predators and how to stay away from humans. Joe's job is to keep watch, to see whether the third time's the charm for the elk in Burwash.
We have to keep track of the population because the restoration project is not over yet. It's not just bringing the elk here and then letting them go and that's it, and hope for the best. You actually have to try and monitor what's happening with the populations.
Down on Lake Ontario, Patrick Hubert is trying to track down an animal that's less aggressive and more elusive: the wild turkey.
Turkeys, they can be easy to see from a distance, but they're very wary of humans. So if they see a human walking or out of a vehicle, they'll run off typically. They have excellent sense of hearing and very good eyesight. Some days it can be pretty easy to find them out in fields.
These aren't the birds you typically find at a Thanksgiving feast. Even though they're the same species, domestic turkeys are broader and meatier after years of selective breeding. Wild turkeys are slimmer, taller, and have longer legs. Plus, they can fly up to 88 kilometers an hour.
Spends a lot of time on the ground, nests on the ground. They do roost in trees. The gobblers can be anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds, and the hens are a fair bit smaller, up to 12 to 15 pounds maximum. But you often do see them on the ground.
Even though they're different from their domestic cousins, they're still considered a tasty meal, which makes them a valuable catch for hunters. That's partly how they disappeared from this landscape over 100 years ago.
The eastern wild turkey was native to Ontario, and they occupied a range that extended from about Owen Sound east to Trenton and south and west of there. They were apparently quite common. We have a lot of historical accounts, but they were extirpated in the early 1900s due to rapid changes in habitat and unregulated harvest.
Turkeys started to disappear throughout North America, and it took several decades for lawmakers to take notice.
In the 1950s and before, people had tried to restore the birds using pen-raised birds, and they weren't very well adapted and they didn't survive.
In 1984, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources slowly started to bring in wild turkeys trapped from around the United States. Patrick keeps watch over this population here to not only see how they're doing, but to learn how they're getting along in the ecosystem. They play a crucial role in the forest, dispersing seeds and eating insects. They're also an important part of the food chain, not just for humans, but for other predators like coyotes, foxes, and eagles.
They are important to a lot of people, that like to see them in the forest and things. And again, an important part of the ecosystem. We study them to learn a lot about nesting habits and their survival, It had been a number of years, again, since we had turkeys on our landscape, and we like to understand the ecological relationships of the birds with the other species in ecosystems they occupy.
While Patrick tries to spot the elusive wild turkey, over in Burwash, Joe's team are hoping they've hit the mother lode on elk data.
I always feel like a kid in a candy store. You never know what surprises you're gonna find.
Here in Burwash, Ontario, a ghost town that's been taken over by nature, Joe Hammer is watching over a population of elk transplanted here from Alberta.
We can follow them around to see what kind of habitat they use, how large are their home ranges, where do they go in the winter as opposed to the summer, what do they eat, what kills them, that's very important, and what's the rate of mortality, how many die a year, and how many calves are brought into the population every year. So that gives you an idea of the growth rate of the population, whether it's stagnating or growing or decreasing. Bears take about 50% of the newborn calves every year. So only about 50% of the calves that are born in a particular year will make it to December. And wolves will take some animals as well. Even though they are getting smarter to them, there is still predation.
It's rutting season, which means the males are very aggressive. Not exactly a time for Joe to get up close and personal. Instead, he teams up with student David Magetchi. They're using radio tracking to keep tabs on the elk.
So this is a radio collar, and this is what we put on the elk in order to track them and find out the location that they are at and the movements that they do throughout the year.
Okay, so right now I'm tracking the elk that have radio collars on them, and we have about 25 of them out there right now. And I'm looking for the strength of the signal, and this is a directional antenna, so I turn it back and forth, and if the strongest signal comes from the direction that the front of the antenna is pointing at, I know that the animal is located in that spot. There's one right here. There's another one. And I'll stop the scanner, and I'll determine which direction it's coming from. There were a couple that were really strong that must be very close. I'll just get one of those. There's one. So that one is right there.
Sure enough, just over the ridge, a cow and her young. They're not always this lucky. The woods are thick, and the elk don't usually want to be seen. To help them get better visuals, they're using a different piece of technology.
So this is a remote camera, and this allows us to get an idea of elk behavior without disturbing the animals. It also allows us to get a relative abundance index of other animals that share the habitat with the elk. So when an animal walks by the sensor, it's triggered by motion, so it'll take a short video clip and allow us to see what the animals are doing in front of the camera.
These cameras help them get incredible images, not just of elk, but also the other animals living in Burwash. Thanks to these videos, David can check in on black bears, wolves, and even a lynx living in the area.
I always feel like a kid in a candy store. You never know what surprises you're gonna find.
These animals are important because they're native to this area, and they're all a part of the delicate balance that helps Burwash thrive.
We've been decreasing really the numbers of species that are living in the wild, and especially large mammals are taking quite a hit all around the world. If you look at large carnivores, and most of the large mammals are now at risk.
All of this biodiversity helps Joe and his team paint a picture of the ecosystem in Burwash. And to him, it's looking pretty good.
I think it's really exciting to be able to bring that part of the Ontario fauna back and reintegrate them into the community of animals, the wildlife that lives here, because they were here at one point, and it's where they belong.
Right now, there are around 200 elk in Burwash. That's just slightly more than were brought here 15 years ago. But what's most important is that the population is on the rise and doesn't seem to be going anywhere, which has Joe cautiously optimistic.
I think that hopefully the trend will continue. We're not going to stop monitoring until we have around 500 animals. That's our goal, to get the population up to about 500.
Over on Lake Ontario, Patrick is hoping that wild turkeys are on a similar upswing, because that means great things for the forests in the area.
While they're adaptable to a lot of different types of habitats, you don't find them in habitats that are very degraded.
Trekking through the forest near Lake Ontario, Patrick Hubert is on a hunt. He's trying to spot some wild turkeys.
This is what we use to actually track right down to the bird when we need to find out if the bird has been predated by a predator or maybe nesting. We use this handheld antenna.
Wild turkeys are actually quite intelligent, and without this antenna, Patrick's job would be much harder.
It would be next to impossible, particularly if they're sitting still. You know, if you could see them moving out in the woods, not as big a problem. But if they're sitting, like on a nest, it'd be very difficult to find them otherwise.
With the antenna, he spots them, just over the ridge. By tracking them through the forests of southern Ontario, he's learning quite a bit about how adaptable these birds really are.
There are a lot of questions about how they survive in northern environments as they expand northward, and we don't understand a lot about that. We know that winters from time to time may impact the numbers and impact the populations, and that's okay, because those ecosystems didn't have turkeys originally.
The turkeys can handle the cold, but what they can't handle is pollution. That's part of what chased them out over a century ago.
Eastern wild turkeys are an important part of the deciduous forest, and while they're adaptable to a lot of different types of habitats, you don't find them in habitats that are very degraded. So you'll find them in a mix of forests and fields, but certainly not in areas without forest, and not in areas where there's too much development typically.
Wild turkeys are making a comeback. Of course, it would have been better if they hadn't been eliminated in the first place. These days, bird populations are being watched more rigorously in hopes of preventing another die-out. Just south of here in Prince Edward County, Terry Sprague is leading a group of bird lovers on a search to see just what species they can find.
Now, what do we got, Myrna? There's the long-tailed ducks singing.
It's bird migration season, and this point is a popular spot for birds to take a break after flying for days across open water.
That's the Nashville warbler. Notice the bluish head? All yellow, bluish head, and you should see an eye ring right around the eye. And that's how you know those species.
But fewer birds are being spotted than in previous years. And to Terry, that's a big concern.
Birds have been declining all over. Very few species have actually been increasing. I don't think it's any one single factor. I think it's everything contributing, and the human population, of course, is resulting in less habitat for birds to nest in, and this is all coming together.
Terry doesn't see some bird species like he used to, like the Virginia rail, which stopped flying here because pollution killed off their food supply. Which is why it's so important for Terry to keep watch. This way, if he notices any other regulars missing, he can ring the alarm.
You might think, well, you know, the birds that aren't important, they can always go somewhere else, or who cares? But we do care, because they form such an important key component of biodiversity and our very existence.
While Terry's catching them, David O'Kine is banding them to see where they go from here.
A good day, we've done up to, I think it was 784 was the peak. On a normal busy day, we're doing 150 to 200.
These are yellow-rumped warblers. As you can see, they've got the very obvious yellow rump. This one is a male because it's got all this blue and black on it. They're also more heavily streaked than the females. They've got more yellow just under the wing here, and they've got this nice blue, this nice and yellow on the crown.
He's also looking for fat content. That tells him just how long the bird has been flying. If it's really low on fat, that might mean it's flying farther than usual.
Fat on a bird is usually yellow, and the flesh is pink. So we just try and blow in there. This has got a very small amount of fat. It probably just arrived last night. There's a code of 0 to 7. 0 is there's no fat on the bird at all. 1 is a very small amount in the bottom. And then 7 is like just a ball of fat. It's like getting a packet of butter and putting feathers in it, because that's what it looks like. Usually migrate with what we call a 3 or 4 fat. And then they'll arrive here, the fat will have gone down. It's like the fuel tank in your car. Uh, 42.1 grams.
The birds are looking healthy, and thanks to these bands, David can make sure they're staying on track.
There he goes.
Terry's group is spotting plenty of birds, and he's very happy about it.
But we have a pretty respectable checklist. We have 352 species on the list now, and that's pretty darn impressive.
Back up north, Patrick is also having good luck tracking down the wild turkeys. They've settled back into the landscape as though they never left. That's great news for the forests, and for the people who have worked hard to bring them back.
Wild turkey is doing very well in the province, and that reflects the health of our ecosystems overall. It also reflects the adaptability of the bird itself. They are a fascinating bird, a very charismatic bird. Some people have described them as not being very smart, but to have the opportunity to observe turkeys, there's a lot of social interaction among a group of birds. They're very vocal, even though it's not often very loud. In the spring, you can hear the gobblers gobbling, and it's really kind of a sign that spring and summer is coming, and they are just a very enjoyable species to observe in our forests.